Hello, I'm Richard Gisbert, and you're at The Listening Post. This week, the mother of all Wikileaks.
This is the largest leak in military history.
The fallout from the release of military documents on the war in Afghanistan. Rupert Murdoch, the Times of London, and the future of journalism online.
How do we make sure that people pay?
You turn them off.
It took a while, but major U.S. news outlets are finally pushing the Pentagon on the rules of reporting on Guantanamo Bay. And iPhone 4.
Excuse me, sir.
The empire strikes back.
Are you seriously defending the new phone by saying it almost performs as well as the old phone?
The war in Afghanistan was back in the headlines this past week, and a website put it there. Wikileaks, the online whistleblowing news-generating phenomenon, has dumped what's being called the biggest ever leak of military documents onto the global news agenda. 91,000 classified papers relating to the war in Afghanistan. Just 3 months ago, Wikileaks made news with the release of that decrypted classified video from 2007, showing U.S. troops firing on civilians in Iraq. This time, the man behind the site, Julian Assange, used a different modus operandi, a different media strategy. Rather than starting out by posting all the documents online, Wikileaks initially collaborated with 3 newspapers: the New York Times, the Guardian in the UK, and the German news weekly Der Spiegel. Our starting point this week is the unprecedented leak of U.S. military documents that set the World Wide Web alight, dominated the pages of newspapers, and had airwaves buzzing from Washington to Kabul.
Well, this isn't a wiki leak. This is a wiki torrent.
This is something we've never seen before. This is certainly the biggest leak in military history.
We have a lot of good reporting here and good material, good narrative to add to the story on Afghanistan.
If you want to understand what's going on in Afghanistan, this helps you too.
Well, could the classified military documents released by WikiLeaks pose a threat to national security?
Since its launch in 2006, through the posting of millions of documents from thousands of secretive sources, WikiLeaks has revealed much to the world. In releasing the Afghan war logs, the organization revealed something of itself, that it's learning about the media.
I'm intrigued by the relationship between you and the traditional non-advocacy media here.
I think WikiLeaks has developed into an organization that realizes that raw documents and data need some contextualization, and that is very well supplied by organizations like The Guardian, like The Times. At the same time, I believe they've achieved a lot more publicity in this situation than previous efforts, precisely because they've roped organizations in.
By the whistleblower website, wikileaks.org.
By working with mainstream media outlets, the New York Times, the Guardian, and Der Spiegel, WikiLeaks got more than just publicity, it got some political cover. Some have said that the whistleblowing site represents the future of journalism. However, WikiLeaks has a reputation amongst the political and media establishments as a rogue element.
I'm a combative person, so I like crushing bastards.
Releasing that Iraq war video in March and calling it collateral murder reinforced that view. But by hooking up with mainstream outlets and tapping into their media brands, WikiLeaks has shielded itself from that kind of criticism.
WikiLeaks didn't just release documents out there into the ether for everyone to report on or not report on. WikiLeaks actually went to major news sources and worked with them on this. So the White House couldn't say, you can't trust this, because the New York Times obviously trusted them.
The collaboration was The Guardian's idea, after the paper learned WikiLeaks had the documents and was preparing to release them.
We decided that the information would make more sense, it would have more impact, there would be more protection for everybody involved if we created this unique collaboration, which The Guardian would set up a secret research room in this building and bring in the New York Times and Der Spiegel, and we would work together analyzing this vast database.
The publications took different editorial approaches. Der Spiegel talked up the WikiLeaks angle, as did The Guardian, which interviewed Julian Assange for its website.
If journalism is good, it is controversial by its nature.
The Times kept WikiLeaks references to a minimum, and there were marked differences in the tone of the reporting. The Guardian, which opposes the war, led with a huge cache of secret U.S. military files, today provides a devastating portrait of the failing war in Afghanistan, revealing how coalition forces have killed hundreds of civilians in unreported incidents. Der Spiegel said, never before has it been possible to compare the reality on the battlefield in such a detailed manner with what the U.S. Army propaganda machinery is propagating. The New York Times' lead was more measured. It called the archives an unvarnished, ground-level picture of the war that is in many respects more grim than the official portrayal. A daily diary of an American-led force often starved for resources, and an insurgency that grew larger and more deadly each year. And whereas The Guardian and Der Spiegel focused on civilian casualties and the coalition's military setbacks, The Times zeroed in on suggestions that Pakistan and Iran are fueling the insurgency. The Times also ran its story past the Obama administration before publishing it. The paper's Washington bureau chief told Yahoo.com, "I did go to the White House and lay out for them what we had to give them the opportunity to comment and react. They did. They also praised us for the way we handled it and for handling the information with care and for being responsible."
Did they try to have their cake and eat it too at the New York Times? I'd say that going to the White House and clearing these papers, giving them a heads up, was due diligence. When you're dealing with material like this, it is important to run it by some sort of authority and make sure there isn't anything sensitive or that's going to endanger people out in the field.
WikiLeaks says it too held back documents for security reasons. Journalists who have studied the site say otherwise, that informants and Afghans working with coalition forces have been identified and are now endangered.
Was ist Wikileaks eigentlich ganz genau?
As for this new model media coalition, WikiLeaks' flirtation with mainstream outlets is not yet a marriage, but the war log story proves there are exciting possibilities for journalism. 3 old media dynasties with expertise to offer, courting a new media darling, coveting her online dowry full of raw data, raw news material.
WikiLeaks chose the old media to publicize this for the reason that by flattering the old media, you get media attention. That's how, like, actual politicians play the New York Times, and that's how newsmakers have used the newspapers and the mainstream media. And it works. It's tried and true, and that's why WikiLeaks was smart to do it that way.
And just because 3 major publications have exploited the WikiLeaks documents, that doesn't mean the story's dead. Far from it.
Other journalists and researchers will now get their chance to look through this material. They'll have a chance to put it on a timeline, look at what else was around when these documents were written. And I think that there will be revelations coming out of this in the weeks and months to come.
Our Global Village Voice is now with their take on the latest revelations from WikiLeaks.
The WikiLeaks release about Afghanistan is central to understanding what that war has become. Julian Assange, the co-founder, has done what journalism should be doing, namely finding, sourcing and releasing information about a war that affects us all.
I wonder those who question or criticize the leak of classified information, how they ignored the killings of thousands of innocent civilians in an unaccountable war.
WikiLeaks is gradually winning a PR campaign against the Pentagon and presenting itself consistently as a credible source of alternative information. And in the long run, that will probably prove to be more damaging than any specific information that it gives out at any one time.
It's time now for Listening Post News Bites. A coalition of media outlets in the United States has demanded that the Pentagon revise its rules for reporting on Guantanamo Bay. A group consisting of the news agency, the Associated Press, as well as the New York Times and the Miami Herald, amongst others, wants the restrictions eased. They've been an issue ever since the military commissions began and flared up once again in May when 4 reporters were banned for publishing the name of an interrogator who had already been named in hundreds of news reports.
These individual reporters are barred from returning to cover future military commissions proceedings.
3 of those reporters are Canadians. Michelle Shepard of the Toronto Star, Stephen Edwards of Can West, and Paul Coring of the Globe and Mail. The 4th reporter is Carol Rosenberg of the Miami Herald. The name of that interrogator, by the way, is Joshua Klaus. That's spelled C-L-A-U-S. Another potentially troubling development in Iraq for the freedom of the media there. The country's Supreme Judicial Court has announced plans to create a new court whose sole function would be to try media cases in areas such as defamation and libel. That announcement has set off alarm bells at organizations like the New York-based Committee to Protect Journalists, which says, quote, a specialized press court is hardly the solution. Historically, special press courts have